Research problem selection. Often we adopt idealistic goals for any research project due to the competition for good grades. You may want to make a significant contribution to the psychological literature, or you may want to publish your work. These are both very important and useful goals, but they should not override the importance of a doable project. Often we want to research very broad, all-encompassing topics. Such broad topics involve more time and effort than most people can afford. However, topics that are too narrow should also be avoided, as it is very difficult to generalize such results. You must strike a balance. Your topic should be narrow enough to focus your project, but not too narrow that the results have no generalizability. Also, your topic should be broad enough to generalize, but not to the extent that you cannot manage that area and your project. It is quite common for us to develop a list of potential research topics. The difficulty arises when we must choose a topic from the list and develop a research proposal. All research is set in motion by the existence of a problem. A problem is a perceived difficulty, a feeling of discomfort about the way things are, or a discrepancy between what someone believes should be the situation and what the situation is in reality. While problems are the initiating force behind research, not all problems require research. A potential research situation arises when three conditions exist. 1. A perceived discrepancy exists between what is and what should be. 2. A question exists about why there is a discrepancy. 3. At least two possible and plausible answers exist to the question. The last point is important. If there is only one possible and plausible answer to the question about the discrepancy, then the research situation does not exist. Essential questions to choose a potential research topics. We will now see three essential questions to ask ourselves, which will help us choose potential research topics. 1. Does the topic elicit interest and curiosity in you? The first decision you should make regards how you actually feel about the topics on your list and whether you could stick with the topic through to the completion of a research project. It is very important that the topic you choose is of interest to you and that it also elicits curiosity within you. Your interests and curiosities should manifest themselves by adding to your enthusiasm about your project and therefore have the potential to act as a powerful motivational device. 2. Is the topic worthwhile? It is very important that you pick a topic that is worthwhile. It is unethical to ask people to participate in your study if it has little or no likelihood, because of poor conceptualization and design of producing meaningful results of furthering research scientific knowledge. If your topic is not worthwhile, not only is it unethical, but you are also failing to satisfy the requirements of meaningful results with theoretical and practical implications. It is important to note that it is your responsibility to come up with valid topics that are worthwhile. Your supervisor's role is to guide you through the research process, not to generate topics for you. Is the topic doable? As recently noted, it is of paramount importance that the topic for your project is feasible. You must make critical decisions regarding whether you will be capable of collecting primary data to answer your potential research question. It is also important to decide whether you would have enough time to gather the information and carry out your analysis. For people who often do not have the time or resources to invest in participant observation studies and should settle for some other method of inquiry that suits their research goals. Once you have narrowed down your list of topics, the next step in setting down the foundations for a successful psychology project is to develop your research question. How to identify and define the research problem? 1. Follow this general procedure when identifying and defining a problem situation. Start with a simple statement of the problem situation. Add details as you review the literature, review theoretical concepts, and investigate the problem in greater depth. Simplify the focus by identifying the most important aspect of the problem that are researchable. 2. Make a first attempt at identifying the problem situation by using the following format. Problem situation. Write a small, simple paragraph that identifies the problem. Discrepancy. State the discrepancy between what is and what should be. Problem question. Write down the central problem question. Possible answers. Write 2 or more plausible answers to the problem question. 3. From available research literature, health and behavioral theory, current service statistics, educated opinions, and details to the problem situation you have just identified. Look for theoretical concepts and operational variables that you may have missed. List these concepts and variables on a piece of paper as you come across them. Try to answer the following questions. What are the incidence and prevalence of the problem? Which geographic areas affected by this problem? Which population groups are affected by the problem? What are the findings of other research studies? What has been done to overcome the problem in the past? How successful were past efforts to overcome the problem? What seems to be the major unanswered question about the problem? With the information you have collected from a literature review and other sources, rewrite your statement identifying and defining the problem. Problem situation, discrepancy, problem question, possible answers. Add detail that help to define the problem, but organize the information. Try to establish the boundaries of the problem. Focus your attention on the most important researchable aspects of the problem. Have one or more colleagues read your final statement identifying and defining the problem situation. Let them tell you what he or she thinks the problem is. If they are unclear about the problem situation or cannot describe the discrepancy between what is and what should be, then go back to the beginning and start all over again. Essentials of a research problem. Dear students, we will now see few basic things which we need to look at for any research problem. To establish that the candidate has a viable and a researchable problem, an acceptable plan of action for undertaking the research. Done sufficient preparation to establish the rationale for the research, a feasible chance of completing the research. The order of the layout which we will see now may be changed and certain sections may be combined, additional points may also be added. The suggested headings serve as road signs to indicate to the evaluator about what the research problem is, how the candidate intends doing the research, what the outcome should be. Title. The title should be concise, as long titles are cumbersome to accommodate in information retrieval systems. Select appropriate keywords or phrases and avoid rambling and meaningless statements such as an investigation into the possibility of conducting research in. Do not start a title with a present participle such as investigating or analyzing. The title should rather read an analysis of. Clarification of basic terms and concepts. The same words may have different connotations to people, especially if they work in various disciplines. List and clarify or define the main words and concepts that you will use in your research. It may also be useful to provide a list of abbreviations and acronyms with their full names. Example, SMME. Commonly used abbreviations acronyms such as UK, USA need not be included. Statement of research problem. This is the heart of the proposal. Normally, a sentence or at most a paragraph is all that is required to describe exactly what the problem is. Many candidates have difficulty in describing the problem. Instead, they list the objectives, outcomes, needs, or other irrelevant aspects. If the research problem is not adequately or precisely described, it is likely to be rejected. The National Research Foundation reports that most research proposals are characterized by poorly formulated problems. Furthermore, researchers often indulge in jargon which seems to obscure rather than explain what the research problem is. Candidates should ensure that the problem and their objectives remain focus of their thinking and writing. Background to the research problem. Since the statement of the problem should be very brief, it is necessary to explain separately what the background to the problem is. Clarify the area of concern or what needs justify the research. This could be a subheading. Any information that helps the evaluator to understand the problem may be included. Indicate why you believe that it is in fact a researchable problem. This section could be combined with the literature review or form a subsection of it. Literature review. An adequate literature review is required in all research proposals, especially funding is required. The purpose of the research review should provide evidence to the faculty research committee that you are well acquainted with past and current research in the field of study. Prove that the thesis dissertation will not duplicate past or current research. Indicate how the intended research relates to similar and past research. In other words, the literature review positions your research within the existing body of knowledge. Hypothesis or research questions. If you state hypothesis, indicate whether they are statistical or non-statistical hypothesis. If statistical, indicate at what level of statistical significance they will be accepted or rejected. Depending on the nature of your discipline, it may not be necessary to base your research on hypothesis. You may list certain fundamental research questions or underlying assumptions fundamental to your research. Objectives of the research. Clarify the aims and objectives of the research. Where feasible, objectives should be divided into main and subsidiary objectives and should be numbered. The NRF Research Review Guidelines specifically evaluate whether the objectives are well articulated and whether they are realistic and attainable. In writing the proposal, it is important to remain focused on the objectives. Research designs and methodology. This is a cornerstone of the research proposal and therefore a critically important section. Failure to address it properly can lead to the research proposal's rejection and even to the rejection of the final thesis dissertation by an external examiner. While you may not be able to give final details of your methodology at the research proposal stage, it is important to give a sound provisional indication so that the evaluator is satisfied with your methodology is relevant and acceptable. Delineation of the research. Delineation or define the boundaries of your research. For example, a study of engineering firms with fewer than 500 employees, plants that grow in Western India only, a study of patients in clinics and hospitals of South India. It might be helpful to indicate what will not be covered by your research. Significance of the research. Indicate the significance of the research. Why is it important? Whom or what industry will it benefit? This is usually vital for funding. Expected outcomes, results and contributions of the research. Indicate what the expected outcomes are and what do you wish to achieve out of your research. A new theory, a prototype, a new model, a solution to a practical problem, a specific aid to practitioners in particular field. What contribution will this research make to the body of knowledge in the particular field of study? For funding purposes, the NRF evaluation guidelines specifically require that the expected outcomes be clearly defined, as well as the likelihood that the research will achieve the expected results within the stated time frame. Problem justification. Now that you have identified and defined the problem situation, it is necessary next to justify the importance of the problem. Research often is expensive and time consuming. Ask yourself why the problem you wish to study is important. Can you justify your selection of the research problem? Can you convince others that the problem is important? In justifying the importance of a research problem, it is helpful to ask yourself a series of questions and then try to answer each of them. Is the problem you wish to study a current and timely one? Does the problem exist now? How widespread is the problem? Are many problems and many people affected by the problem? Does the problem affect key populations such as youth, PLHA, mothers or children? Does the problem relate to ongoing program activities? Does the problem relate to broad social, economic and health issues such as unemployment, income distribution, poverty, the status of women or education? Who else is concerned about the problem? A top government officials concerned, or medical doctors or other professionals concerned. Review your answers to these questions and arrange them into 1 or 2 paragraphs that justify the importance of the research problem. Start with discussing the broad issues that justify the problem and then begin to focus on the more specific issues related to a particular population group or geographical setting. Example of a research problem. Problem situation. In country A, the National AIDS Program has initiated an experimental project to provide highly active antiretroviral therapy drugs to 1,000 persons with AIDS. All of the patients in the program receive extensive individual counseling from trained counselors. They also receive information packets on how and when to take the various pills they receive. These emphasize the need to take the pills exactly as prescribed and describe the possible side effects of the pill. All patients are monitored regularly at a clinic for CD4 cell counts and viral load levels. They are also visited in their homes monthly by trained care providers who answer questions and monitor adherence to drug regimen. Despite these efforts, a recent detailed assessment of all the HAART patients found that 43% of them had taken their pills incorrectly over the past month. Viral load levels had raised in the patients and CD4 cells had declined. Discrepancy. The National AIDS Program prides itself on providing high-quality services to the 1,000 patients with HIV/AIDS in the experimental program. Laboratory equipment is functioning well, drug supplies are available, the lab technicians are trained, the counselors are also trained and supervised, and the information packets given to each patient are comprehensive. Given these conditions, all patients should know how to correctly take their HAART medications, but at least 43% of them are not taking the medication correctly. Problem question. What factor or factors are responsible for a relatively high level of non-adherence to the drug regime among the patients who are counseled and monitored closely? Possible answers. The counselors are inadequately trained to explain in simple terms the complex treatment regime required for patients on antiretroviral and consequences of failing to adhere to this regime. The information packets received by the patients are too complex, particularly for a population with a low level of literacy, and therefore are not read by many patients. Many patients experience serious drug side effects, including drug toxicity and intolerance, which led to difficulties with adherence to the regime and in some cases to non-adherence. In this example, the problem situation is clear. A survey of HIV positive persons found that 43% did not adhere to the prescribed antiretroviral drug regime. A discrepancy exists. With the availability of counseling, information packets and home visits, HIV positive patients should know how to take their drugs correctly, but 43% do not take their drugs correctly. The discrepancy between what should be and what is suggests the problem question and 5 possible answers to the question. It is not known which of these 5 possible answers are correct or more nearly correct. All possible and plausible answers could relate to factors under the control of program managers. Identifying and selecting a problem situation is the first essential step in designing a research proposal, but it must then be followed by a process of problem definition. The research problem identified must now be defined in terms of its occurrence, intensity, distribution, and other measures for which data are already available. The aim is to determine all that is currently known about the problem and the reason it exists. While it is always possible to guess why a problem exists, guesses are often wrong and usually does not provide a firm basis for designing a research study. A far better way to define a problem situation is to review relevant literature, examine current survey statistics, seek educated opinions from persons concerned about the problem, and obtain probable reasons for the problem from social, economic, or health theory.